What did the future feel like when people first started using synthesizers? That feeling of touching the electricity and creating sound. Who better to ask than Martyn Ware, the pioneering force behind Heaven 17 and the Human League and BEF. He is one of those people who has always had one foot in the future, and with just 30 minutes to talk to him at Tallinn Music Week in the Estonian capital, I had to choose really wisely. Otherwise, I think we probably could have talked about politics for half an hour, or I could have got into the depths of his conversations he's been having quite publicly around the value of music and the royalties from Grand Theft Auto, but I decided not to touch on those topics. I had bigger thoughts and feelings and questions to ask him, which really relate to this series of looking forwards and trying to work out what the future might be like. So we did not discuss Tina Turner for more than a passing second. We did not touch on the fact he sold millions and millions of records, but we do touch on his sound installations, which I think are a fascinating project that he's been working on. And we do get into what it would be like if he had his own bar, because in Tallinn there is a Depeche Mode theme bar, and I was really curious what his would be like. You will hear at the very end of this that we transition into a panel, and that conversation will be coming up in the next episode. So this is my conversation with Martyn Ware. Good afternoon, Tallinn. My name is Sean Adams. I run a music magazine called Drowned in Sound, and we turned 25 years old this year. And I thought I'd ask Martyn Ware, the man behind innovative, pioneering records that I'm sure I don't need to introduce to people in this room, producer who's worked with Tina Turner, Shaka Khan, which I think you can only say with that diction, with the little jump in the middle, Terence Trent D'Arby. There's all sorts of, you've worked with lots and lots of innovative people.
Sananda Maitre, yeah.
First question, if you were to gaze 25 years into the future to 2050, what do you think the world and what do you think music will be like?
We'll all be on jetpacks. We'll have neural implants. Music will be generated automatically, directly into each other's brains. We won't need hi-fi systems. Is that enough? We'll all, oh, by the way, we won't leave our houses. We will astrally project. Is that any good?
Have we moved much beyond the Jetsons?
No, I haven't moved beyond the Jetsons. In fact, they don't know who the Jetsons are.
What did the future feel like when you first touched a synthesizer?
That's a good question. I knew that we were just talking about rock music. When Eno came along, it seemed to signify the future to me. Somebody who was playing with one finger for a start, which appealed to me greatly, and a joystick, and wore glitter, and was kind of like a transition through the glam rock stage into the creative stage. And so he was a big influence, and still is to this day. Brian, I love him to death. What was the question again?
What did the future feel like when you first?
Oh, feel like, right. It felt a bit like rock music when they came along. And of course, Bowie and all that period was very important. But when synthesizers came along, it seemed, growing up in the 70s, I used to go and see a lot of acts like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson and various bands, anybody who had a synthesizer I was into, basically. But they were so expensive, they seemed like an unattainable dream. That I had no ambitions to be a professional musician. And then punk came along. And coincidentally, at the same time, entry-level synthesizers were starting to be sold in long-haired guitar shops, and I made a decision to use my first paycheck to buy a a Korg 700S, actually, for anybody who's interested, and it was either that or get a second-hand car, and I still can't drive. So there you go.
So at that point in time, like, I think I read that you were programming computers. Was that your job, or was that
No, not programming, unfortunately. Not as glamorous as that. Operating giant mainframe computers, doing payroll and really exciting stuff. But ironically, Ian Marsh, who was also in the early Human League, had got a job as a computer operator as well. So we used to work nights, both of us, night shifts, and then during the day we'd go, he bought a synthesizer as well, and we thought, we'll just mess around, right? So we weren't really serious about it ever being anything other than a creative hobby, really. But I think, looking back on it now, that was what gave me the artistic mindset, which has enabled me to have a 45-year career.
And at the time, people wouldn't have really been able to engage with technology. Like, you could watch television and things were broadcast to you. And I guess you could play a guitar, but that felt like a physical thing. Did it feel like you were entering into the digital realm by
absolutely.
using machines?
Yeah, it was like the Flintstones. It was, it's very hard for contemporary musicians to comprehend it, but, there was an article in the NME, which is UK's biggest music paper and taste maker in the mid-70s, by Eno again. And it said, rock and roll is dead, essentially. I'm paraphrasing here. All you need is a tape recorder, a synthesizer, and a microphone. And that's all you need. And we went, okay, that's what we're going to do.
Have you ever bought any more gear?
I have, and I've sold a lot of it for peanuts. But that kind of DIY aesthetic for making music was very important. And it all kind of, the Blue Touch paper was punk, actually, because we were making our own fanzines. We were making music just for each other on cassette in Sheffield. We had no money, or very little money, and there wasn't much of a kind of consumer thing going on. There were virtually no venues.
You couldn't drop a record on Bandcamp, could you?
No,
to find the means of production in order to release it.
There were no recording studios in Sheffield at that point. So it was really, your friends were your only... in Sheffield, it's a working men's town, right? All there was working men's clubs where everybody was playing Smoke on the Water, at extreme volume for 55-year-old guys, which is weird. And so we didn't want to get into that circuit. We didn't want to be the shoegazy student thing. In fact, we did an early gig, not with the Human League, but with a proto-Human League called VDK and the Studs. We only did one gig, and our drummer wore a jumpsuit with cut student grants on the back because we hated the students, even though we loved going to the Students' Union to watch the bands. And yeah, it was a very DIY culture, and that meant that when we eventually got, I'm cutting a very long story short, when we eventually got signed, we insisted that we created our own artwork, obviously produce our own music, etc., etc. And so right from the outset, we had we insisted in a very bolshy Sheffield Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire way that we were in control of our own artistic cinematic universe.
Cinematic universe, the world building that people talk about now.
That's it, really.
I read an interview with you where you talked about being driven by the promise of the future. And I looked then through your catalogue and all the other things you've worked on. What is it about what's on the horizon that keeps you excited and can kind of... What is it? Does it always feel like there's something new's loading and you want to see what it is? I'm
optimistic that we're eventually going to break out of this kind of death spiral of averageness. there are more people making music in the world now than there's ever been. I spent 5 years as a principal for an MA course on songwriting and production. And I mentored a lot of young people. What I witnessed in them, however talented they were, is a lack of confidence in their own voice. Not just literally singing, I mean their own identity. So there's a crisis of identity, and I think it's the duty of our generation to give confidence to the young people, because they're the people who are going to be entertaining us in the future. And not to be so fearful, to be daring, not just try to chase the money, because in my experience, the money's always run away whenever I've tried to chase it. I know it's easy saying that because I've worked with Tina Turner and Terence Trent D'Arby and Erasure and all these people.
I think your bio mentioned you sold 50 million records in your career. It's probably gone up a bit since then as well.
Yeah, it's probably more like 65 now. But, I know, it's ludicrous, isn't it? Frankly.
We were meant to put them all in the room if they were CD.
Yeah, but nobody buys records anymore, unfortunately, do they? But the important thing is, if you follow your artistic muse, of course, you've got to have a certain degree of talent in the first place, and you've got to work hard at it. But to keep front of mind that, everything you do has to serve this artistic central directive. And just forget, the money will come or not. I've done loads of projects that have failed. Lots. Some never got released. Some just fizzled out. But not to get discouraged by that. And that's really the main reason why I'm still here, I think.
And do you think that there was something in the punk spirit? Malcolm McLaren talked about we wanted to be glorious failures. I think was I miss bastardizing the quote slightly. I think it was like rather a benign success than I can't remember what it was now. Rather a glorious failure than a benign success, I think was the quote. Do you think that there was something in that desire not to be a wrong answer, which I think is one of the big lessons from punk, is that you do it and you find out if it was the right after.
Actually, ironically, that gig I mentioned earlier with the drummer with cut student grants on his thing, he said there were members of Cabaret Voltaire in this. We had a supergroup before we had a group. This is quite good. So it's Cabaret Voltaire, some members of a band called 2.3 from Sheffield, Addie Newton from Clock DVA, myself, blah, blah, blah. And we were on a bill with two punk bands. There was the band after us. We were the first band. The band after us was called the Drones from Manchester. They were terrible. And then the headline act was Slaughtering the Dogs. Do you remember them? You're too young, aren't you? Right. Anyway, good name. They were even worse. I mean, they were unlistenably terrible. And they were punk, right at the start of punk, really, both from Manchester, I think. And there was a little light bulb went on in my head, because we were just messing about, right? And I privately thought to myself, and I finally plucked up the courage to talk to other people afterwards about it, who agreed that maybe we should start taking this a little bit more seriously, because we can't be any worse than them. They were really, it was like run out of the building terrible. So not all music is good. You've got to bear that in mind too.
So how did someone who's into punk rock start making sound installations?
Well, we've done it from the start, really. Because the early Human League gigs, we had visual accompaniment with slides, kind of abstract. In fact, when we first saw what he was doing, because we were facing that way, we couldn't see what our slide projector guy was doing. I thought, this guy's insane, it's like pictures of 1950s sofas and Thunderbirds and all popular culture, basically. He was obsessed with that. So that was kind of like a kind of rock. It was kind of like a shit Kraftwerk version of an installation, really. And 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 then actually around about that time, we did some pretty abstract instrumental only stuff like Dignity of Labour, inspired by Yuri Gagarin returning to Earth, because we were all science fiction freaks. And so we were always interested in we always kept a kind of parallel thread going of esoteric stuff and trying to go for the jugular stuff, often missing the jugular completely. But it's only really when we gained enough experience a bit later on with Heaven 17 that we could actually go, look, we can write songs and we can produce them, and we were the complete package, We were even in smash hits, The important thing. For people who don't know, that's like the big teeny pop paper,
And can you tell us a little bit about some of your sound installations you've done? Because I feel like they're quite, even now, they seem like a step into the future.
Yeah, well, everything I do is kind of future-facing deliberately. So towards the end of the 1990s, I was still am big friends with Vince Clarke from Erasure, and we could see the way the wind was blowing, and that we were both getting offered worse and worse jobs as producers. I mean, to like boy bands, really terrible stuff. I mean, I could have continued making a decent living, but there was no excitement in it. So we said to each other, can we find something to regenerate our, reboot? And we were asked by coincidence to help create an immersive sound installation at the new Centre for Popular Music in Sheffield, which was being built for the millennium. And this was fortunate because the funders paid for us to build this three-dimensional sound piece of software, which we designed. And I'm still using it to this day, 25 years later. So I've done lots, and we've done about 80. My company's called Illustrious Company. You can look it up. I've done about 80 major installations around the world, mainly outdoors, a lot of it, but also the bread and butter stuff is like museums and temporary exhibitions and stuff. We've done things like the whole of the Millennium Bridge in London during the Olympics. We've done Trafalgar Square. We did a giant square in the centre of Mexico City. There's loads of it. You have to go online and have a look.
And what is it about sound that keeps you in particular fascinated? Like, and the experience of hearing and sometimes feeling sound. What's
right? So I grew up I didn't play guitar. I didn't grow up wanting to be in a rock group. My first experience of creating music was literally an analog synthesizer. So, and actually, it was a Roland System 100, which is a modular synthesizer. And so I learned that without looking at the manual, just by experimentation. So
who actually reads the manuals?
Well, exactly. But the important thing about the manual, on the back it had printed no illegal connections, which is such a great thing. Because you go, what you mean I can plug anything into anything and see what happens? The worst that's going to happen is it won't make a sound. And that is like the best permission to experiment you can imagine. So it's like, all of a sudden you go, right, okay, we need a kick drum. Okay. Every time, there was no presets. Every time you create it from scratch, just based on what you're hearing. So this is like ear training, automatic ear training. Same with snare, same with a hi-hat, same with bass, etc., etc. But in the midst of all that, you can design things that sound like thunderstorms or, sirens coming from the distance towards you or, anything you can imagine. And it just seemed like a wide open field for creativity, which it was for us. But we didn't have any musical training, so we didn't have any limits. And so what we thought was, if we write traditional pop songs or rock songs, and we just use this palette, it'll automatically, it's like shooting for the moon and getting halfway there, you're still in the sky, right? So we thought, well, it's automatically going to sound futuristic, which it did. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite as commercial as we thought it was going to be. And it wasn't until we got to the band split and Dare came out and Penthouse and Pavement came out that we kind of nailed the commercial part. But I regarded the first two albums still as a really honest piece of authentic work and a necessary seasoning of the wok, you know.
A seasoning of the wok. That's a phrase that's going to stick. I want to ask you about your podcasts.
Yeah.
And because I think it's noticeable researching for this interview, and some interviews you do start doing research, and like I thought I kind of knew about someone, and you've done nearly 300 episodes, is that right? What made you start it, and what's made you carry it on for so long? Because that's an endeavor. I mean, you're not in Joe Rogan numbers yet, but you're not far off.
I'm catching up, I think. It started off in COVID. We were all going insane, weren't we? So I had to do something creative. It's what makes me happy. And I didn't feel following my creative muse, I didn't feel any inspiration to write music at all. Going, well, you know, write music about the misery of isolation. You know, Jesus Christ, who wants to hear that? Not even me, right? So I decided to do something creative. Also, I was writing during lockdown my autobiography, and I thought, well, at very least, I'll do a few episodes of this. Some of my mates in the music industry I can interview, and it'll act as a kind of trailer for the autobiography. And then it kind of grew up and left home, and now I liken it to a roundabout that I can't get off. It's kind of got a life of its own. It's grown up, got married, had children. You know, they've had children. And I get approached all the time by PR companies to publicise. If anybody in here wants me to interview them, just approach me at the end. I'm desperate. No, I'm not, no.
You've had some really big names on there, and I imagine a few of your own heroes and a few of the kind of contemporaries that you're inspired by. Could you tell me sort of what it's been like, the process of doing it, maybe a little bit about if you learned some lessons about music of things you weren't expecting?
Learned a lot about creativity. I've learned that a lot of people are quite insecure. I've learned that a lot of people are on a kind of wave of confidence, which then comes crashing down, which then comes back up again. Some people can't do that, so they leave the music industry. I've interviewed politicians, comedians, filmmakers. You know, some of my real heroes, like Robert Fripp, was incredible. You know, I mean, the way his mind works is beyond my comprehension, you know. And we need to treasure these people. And I was really thrilled recently when I got an email from the National Sound Archive at the British Library in London saying, would you mind if we kept your podcasts as part of our archives for research purposes? And I'm going, Jesus, that's the payment for me, right? You know, really, because that's legacy. That's there forever and ever. Amen. You know.
Which, in an interesting way, you talk a lot about the future and you've made a lot of history. And I think it's really telling that you've talked to people about their stories. But the first thing you said then was you've learned a lot about creativity.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's feeding into projects that you're doing and ways of thinking about things in ways that someone who didn't have that appetite for the future and what's possible wouldn't have started a podcast in lockdown. They would have put their feet up and watched The West Wing or something. Like, what is it about, what do you think it is? And I'm going to say this, we're two white guys sat on a panel, but we're both from working class backgrounds. I think class is one of the few things which doesn't get talked about as much in music. And I think there's something different in people who don't come from a place of privilege and a place of kind of, I've noticed that the people I just meet in the industry that have got a very different way about them and what they do and what they try to give back. Because I think the podcast is really interesting in itself because you're getting to meet people you want to hang out with, but for the listener, they get a chance to sit on your shoulder and meet them too, and to learn something and have questions be asked in a way that maybe a journalist like me wouldn't. And I think that there's something very giving, and I'm just curious whether, as someone that's come from a very different background to people in the industry, whether you think that's maybe informed how you are, not why you are.
Well, it used to be a lot of working class people in the music industry. Not so much now, because it's so expensive to get on that ladder. Ironically, the means of production have been emancipated now. I mean, everybody can make music on their laptops, but getting into the professional end of it is an issue. My interviewing style is informal and kind of peer-to-peer. And I often say to people, look, when are you going to get a chance to sit either on Zoom or in a room and talk for an hour uninterrupted to somebody that you admire? I'm not saying they admire me, by the way, but in fact, I get a lot of complaints on not a lot, but I get several complaints saying, why don't you shut the fuck up, Martyn, and let them talk, right? And I'm saying, well, that's the nature of conversation. If you were in a pub or something, it'd be 50-50. Well, it'd be pretty strange if it wasn't. So, but I think the information I get out of these people is totally different to what a journalist could get out, because I have a different relationship with them. It's that simple.
So, one last question, because we're going to switch to a panel in a second. This is the proper journalist question. So we're in Tallinn. There's a Depeche Mode bar. What would the Martyn Ware bar be like?
Oh, fucking hell. I think I'd subject people to immersive soundscapes that they can't comprehend in an effort to modulate their existence.
I'm in there in my head.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's my millionaire idea. Never mind making music. Yeah.
It's a cave with sound.
Yeah, sound cave. Sounds good, doesn't it? It's like the Bat Cave or something.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
It's all right.
I am amazed we didn't get to talk about politics.
Yep.
So whilst everyone's coming to the stage for our next panel, I thought I could maybe ask you, I can't remember, you used the phrase a minute ago about a recovering dystopian. What do you fear the future might be like?
Oh, I'm definitely a dystopian. I'm a laughing dystopian, yeah. I think we're all doomed, basically. But we may as well have a good time while we're doing it.
And that's pretty much what Fascist Groove thing.
Yeah. Does anybody want a new version of Fascist Groove thing? I think it'd be a good idea.
LCD Sound System did a little update.
They did, yeah.
Did that feel like being honoured, or did that feel like someone's taken your song? Did you feel...
No. I think it was very nice of them. It's PRS, isn't it? Who cares? It was as good as our version.
Yeah, they changed it about the Orange Man, didn't they?
Did they?
They changed one of the Reagan lyrics, yeah.
Did they? I don't know.
Which I think breaks copyright rules and stuff.
Oh, great. Can I sue him?
Yeah, go on then. So I've got a news story out of you in the end. So can should we bring up the chairs and invite up our guests for our second part of our
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Martyn.
It's not every day you get to sit down with someone who's made history and yet seems so untouched by it and so comfortable sharing and giving. And as I said in the conversation, when he talks in the podcast, there is so much learning going on for him and for the listener, and there's like a great sharing in that. The podcast is called Electronically Yours, and I'd really recommend just dipping in, like finding an artist you recognize the name of and just listening. I mean, you could listen start to finish, but that's quite a big undertaking. In the next episode, you will hear the panel that we mentioned at the end there. It's a conversation set up by an organisation called In Place of War, who Martyn and I are involved with. They're a climate and conflict organisation that just do all these amazing projects. You'll hear from Ruth what they do. And that conversation is a bit longer than this one, so I'll separate them into two episodes, so you've got a bit more time and depth and breadth to kind of listen to both conversations. I think that Martyn's given me a lot to think about how people in positions of power can use that power to redirect it. Thank you for listening to this episode. As you can probably hear, or maybe you can't because maybe I make it sound effortless, but a lot of research went into that conversation just to try and get right down to a few questions that I thought would really pull things out of Martyn that he doesn't always talk about, and to try and give you, the listener, whether you're a fan or not, an insight into where he comes from and what he's about, and a ways of thinking about the future, even from the lens of the past, to try and understand how we might project ourselves forwards collectively and what that might mean and what that might feel like. Because I think people like Martyn have got such a rare insight, and to really dive in and research him, I mean, I probably could have spoken to him for 3 hours and we carried on nattering after the panel. He's just a great human being, and those should be celebrated. This was the Drown in Sound podcast. If you enjoyed this, if you want to support my work, go to drownandsound.org, sign up, become a subscriber. That would be fantastic. Anyway, next up, the episode, which was our panel conversation.